Conversation has to continue. This whole thing about No Kings is incredibly fascinating. We're doing what good public policy research organizations should do. We're taking an organization at its own words, and we're investigating them.
Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Welcome to the Public Square.
We're looking to expose the validity or the invalidity of the truth claims, the moral authority, the history, the validity of the propositions, what are there and it's all there. If you go with us to nokings.com, you can see it all for yourself. Now,
nokings.org.
Sorry. You sure it's also not .com?
I don't know if it is not. I mean, I'm looking at nokings.org.
Type in nokings.com.
Okay.
It looks like that takes you to a book.
Yeah, it's a weird
Anatomy of the State. That's actually really smart. They bought a web domain and just takes you right to a PDF of a book they wrote. That's brilliant.
Is that their book?
I don't know about their book. It's someone's book.
Anatomy of the State.
Anatomy of the State. Murray N. Rothbard. Oh, from the Mises Institute. Yeah, that's a conservative organization.
Sorry, thank you, Melody. That was really important.
Can we just leave this? That's kind of funny. That's interesting.
2009 copyright date on the book.
Can this be part of the show? I don't know. I like the roughness of that's kind of interesting.
The quote from Rothbard is, "The greatest danger to the state is independent intellectual criticism." Leave nokings.com.
All right, so my bad, but what an interesting discovery live on radio. Nokings.com is a completely different site, which comes from a conservative site. Nokings.org is where No Kings, the street marching's going on, which also tells you there's a little bit of disheveled reality on this, given the money they've spent. But Rob, you've had a question for all this time.
Now I have to know the negotiations that went on behind the scenes to try and obtain nokings.com, because there was an offer made. So what amount of money was rejected? But
that's right. That's putting your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, by not taking it.
Mm-hmm.
But in watching things that are happening on the street, I would like to go to some other countries and watch, or I need to do a better job of reading, maybe it's not taking place, where protesters are actively out waving flags of other countries in opposition to the country in which they reside.
Burning flags of the other country.
And they have the right to burn the flags. They have the right to wave the flag of any country that they choose to wave. That is their right. Here, my question is, would they go to any other country and wave that flag? Because what do they want?
What do they want? That's the key. And what they want is they want what they want. They want it now. And what they really want is the power. This is an electoral strategy for 2026 to win back the House and the Senate. Electoral strategy in 2028 to win back the White House for the Progressive Socialist Party, which used to be called the Democrat Party. And you just can't not see it. Look at those 209 organizations. They make up the whole highway of what Democrats and progressives do together when they have power. Let's remember, when the Democrat Party, the Socialist Republican group, had power, when they had 60 members of the Senate, which is so rare since World War II, to have a 60% supermajority to overcome the filibuster, they could have done anything. They could have solved the immigration problem when they had that opportunity. They could have done anything. They chose Obamacare. Now, here's a big reveal. If you go back in our files, you will find that right at the close of the Obamacare fight in Congress, Barack Obama came right here to Ohio, to within 10 minutes of where this office is at right now in Valley City, and delivered one of his last speeches of advocacy for passage of Obamacare. So we went out with thousands of other people, and we stood on the street in quiet, peaceful protest. Now, it had to be quiet and had to be peaceful because it was freezing cold, rain and sleet and ice, and people stood there. And we handed out a piece of material called No Kings, because what we were seeing was that the Obamacare law would put the Secretary of HHS and other administrative secretaries in so much power that they could literally control the healthcare of every American and the practice of medicine in regards to record keeping in every single doctor's office, so that your doctor was going to literally be tethered to his or her computer, following around, looking over their computer at you while they're trying to practice medicine, because the federal government and the system had been completely taken over by a centralized agency. All of that stuff has come true. The 47 million people they said would be insured have not been insured. After all these years, they took over and gave the power to a group of kings. And you give an honest conversation with any doctor and ask them, was medicine better in 1980, in 1990, in 2000, or today? And if they were around, they will tell you light years better. Not technology. Technology's better. But the practice of medicine, light years better. So the idea of being dictated to by kings in the bureaucracy, we're not in favor of that. They should have looked up our stuff. Maybe they should have come talk with us. We've got the same kind of feeling. We don't like being told what to do by someone and we have no voice.
Well, that's what's interesting about the list of organizations, those 209, is many of them are screaming, stay out of the doctor's office, doctor, patient. I'm like, you want to tell me who my doctor has to be? You don't feel that way. You want to be in charge of everything.
Well, let's go back to COVID. Another issue on healthcare. Why is it that this always kind of breaks out? And that's why they're talking about Medicaid. They know people are terrified on not being able to gain access to healthcare. They're afraid. And we know that we have the best healthcare in the world, and that's why it's the most expensive healthcare in the world. And it's difficult. They're afraid.
But they always talk about the slashing of benefits.
Right.
And what is being proposed is not the generic slashing of benefits. It is the trimming out of illegitimate benefits going to illegal participants, or waste or fraud.
Yes. And again, anyone who's been around the medical community, who knows people who practice, who's in practice, or who's had to use it, knows that there are people who, let's just say, are tempted to find out the edges and the holes and the windows and the opportunities to make money off of the inefficiency of a bureaucracy that large. And so there are ways. So Congress is constantly trying to tighten reins, tighten eligibility, make it such so that if you can care for yourself, and you should be, that you get a hand up but not a hand out. Because we're broke. By the way, no kings. We're broke.
But the whole process of doing that keeps the system healthy.
With that, no kings, we're all
keeps
paupers.
The benefits available to those who truly need it and are truly eligible to receive the benefits.
But let's not get involved in the details. All we want is democracy.
Sure.
Okay, now, when they start talking about no kings, they're also walking into Thomas Paine and common sense. Because Thomas Paine and common sense, there's a whole chapter on a passage of the Bible, 1 Samuel chapter 8, in which Thomas Paine makes the case that when the Hebrew Republic, by choice, decided to change their form of government, their covenantal agreement with God, and move from a system of laws based upon revelation that they gave their consent to, and that they executed in a concept of a Republican form of government, and they had representatives, they had judges, they had people working the process. They accepted a form of government, and then they changed it and went to a monarchy. They went to kings. That in essence was the end of that period of time in which the Hebrew Republic and the Hebrew nation worked best. From there, everything went downhill. And as they were warned by Samuel the prophet, who plays a leading role in the House of David, the wonderful television series that's available on Amazon. All right, Samuel the seer told them, this king will make you his slaves, because that's where monarchy based on power ultimately always ends.
But even within that, with all that being 100% true, even within that, David was considered a man after God's own heart. God still worked with a king.
He didn't abandon the people.
Right. He brought good from evil.
To the degree that the kings obeyed the revealed law and operated in accordance with that form of consent to revelation in obedience, voluntary self-government, they were blessed.
They had some good kings. Even on into Christendom. If you look
Yes.
at Christendom, there were some good kings. There were kings, I believe, who were sainted.
Oh, and by the way, the reason that Great Britain hasn't fallen apart in that descendancy of monarchy for power alone is because they balanced it. Let's go back to the Magna Carta, 1215. Hello. All right. And there's a thing called Parliament. All right.
And when you talk,
So it is a functioning form of government on the consent of the governed.
and when you talk to people from across the pond, it's always interesting to me how they talk about Americans are far more infatuated with the royal family than they are over there.
Yeah. It's an interesting conversation. So what we've got is No Kings is trying again to play off on the Revolutionary period, the War for Independence. Now, we call it Revolutionary War for Independence. Those are synonymous terms, but not really. There is a distinction. There is a difference between a revolution. We talked about this in a recent broadcast on the Public Square. I want to urge everybody to go back and look at that program, listen to that program, and share it with others, because we're getting into the difference. Now, so No Kings is basically traipsing on the colonial era, traipsing on the most popular brochure of the day in Common Sense with Thomas Paine. But Thomas Paine's case was that America was going to right the wrong of 1 Samuel chapter 8 and become a constitutional representative republic that would put the power over civil government back in the hands, the way that God did it in the beginning, in the hands of the people. That argument prevailed.
Yeah, and we want it to be in the hands of the people. Again, to go back to COVID, when governors were making decisions and in essence handing down orders. I mean, even if we agreed with the orders, we were like, hang on a minute here. You don't have the authority to do what you want to do. We understand it, but you have to go through the process. Our government's set up that way. And if you don't object to people abusing authority and power when you agree to it, you can't do it when you disagree
The process,
to.
Rob, is illegitimate. It is controlled now by authoritarian forces that are simply hurting people, and we have to stop them because they're hurting people and they must be stopped.
The process never changed from the beginning of the nation to now. We elect senators, we elect representatives in different election cycles. We have the opportunity to participate in elections. If we're citizens, that's a right that's afforded to citizens. So the process of changing policies, what they're wanting is a system override. They want to get rid of what we have. When you're looking at what some of the grievances were in the Declaration, when they're talking about cutting off trade to the colonies so they can't participate in that. The king, he has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, destroyed the lives of our people, suspending our own legislatures. There were so many things above and beyond the no taxation without representation concept. There were more than 25 grievances that were placed very specifically and very truthfully in the Declaration of Independence. And then that morphed over a process of deliberation to yield a constitution that we still use. They don't want to use the constitutional processes. They don't want to use the constitutional republic form of government to accomplish their purposes. They want to create chaos.
And from that chaos, they want to transform civil government into a democracy, which basically is government by public opinion poll. That's what they want, because they do believe that eventually they're thinking about how we should be governed by an elite, governed by people who are smarter than all the rest of us, governed by those who give them what they want when they want it, and that they will end up in that power curve, and the rest of us will just have to take it or leave it.
But it's not just about power, it's about money.
Well, sorry to cut in, but Dr. Jeff Sanders couldn't be with us today for this recording session. He had some other very important things he had to do. But he did want to share some of his remarks with us. So I'd like to just do a quick cutaway to some audio of Dr. Jeff right now.
Where were the protesters when Karen Bass allowed her city to burn down? Where were they protesting? when they weren't. And then also, so Trump is enforcing the law. President Obama deported some 3 million illegal aliens. That is a hard fact. In fact, he's now called the deporter-in-chief. And that's not just me saying that. It's not just conservative bloggers or whatever saying that. 3 million people he deported in 8 years. Now, Trump, if he deported, he's on track for deporting 150,000 people, 200,000 people a year. In 4 years, that's barely 1 million people. So why is Trump this ogre and threat to democracy? But Barack Obama was fine. And here's a third point, 300,000 children who were illegally brought across the border during the Biden administration are missing. Nobody knows where they are. Nobody's protesting that. Why? Why aren't we burning our cities down? Because 300,000, it's for the children.
So I think one of the most important things, Jeff, is bringing to the table is where were they when? That's the question. Where were they when? And I think you could make a pretty good case that when Barack Obama was president, when Joe Biden was president, when Bill Clinton was president, these folks were by and large A-OK as long as they had the power to keep the train moving toward the programs, the policies that they wanted to see happen, particularly when they had that 60% or that 60-vote supermajority in the Senate. They chose Obamacare. So controversial was that plan, so divisive was that plan, that they immediately, in the very next special election, within months, lost Ted Kennedy's seat in Massachusetts. Kennedy had died, and it was considered to be the Kennedy seat forever. And the Republicans took that seat back over in, of all places, the state of Massachusetts. That was how vibrant the resistance was, that people felt they had been ripped off by the whole process, and Obamacare was ramrodded down their throats. And they just were furious about it, and they flipped the Senate. Now, they still had majority, but they never got to 60 votes again. And in essence, the balance of the Obama administration was cut into pieces. But they had their one shining moment. And what did they go for? Bureaucratic control over people's health.
And that's not just a euphemistic statement. Inside of Obamacare, there were more than 800 references to the Secretary of Health and Human Services, what that person shall do. There were another 300 plus references on what they may do, permissive authority. So in essence, Obamacare handed control without legislative oversight into a bureaucracy that was already out of control.
Rahm Emanuel, who was chief of staff for Barack Obama, mayor of Chicago, and currently now is discussing a potential run for the presidency, is famous for the quote, never let a crisis go to waste. Well, it looks like what No Kings is doing is seeking to create that crisis through protest in the streets. Now, you've got to go back and listen to the longer format of this conversation on the Public Square, which you can get through the phone app, which you can get at thepublicsquare.com. You can listen to on YouTube. You can listen to on iHeart, wherever podcasts are found. And you can listen to over 230 radio stations as well, I might add. So let's go back to Rahm Emanuel. A crisis. 3.5% principle. Enough chaos in the streets, even though they disclaim violence. Enough chaos in the street will frighten people and bully them enough into accepting that we've got to give these people what they're asking for, because if we don't, it'll be worse than what we have right now. That's the principle.
And they're funding that chaos.
Yeah.
You look at those 209 organizations, we know the names behind them, who's writing the checks, the George Soroses of the world that are willing to fund the chaos. And that chaos isn't happening on the streets in which they live.
How irresponsible is it to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to create chaos in a fallen world where you know that there are bad actors out there who will also enjoy the opportunity to exploit that form of chaos? They blame Donald Trump for, and quote, insurrection, their term, which became universally adopted by Congress and by the media on January 6th. We'll give them their term. They blamed Donald Trump for irresponsibly inciting that event. And yet No Kings has a 3.5 principle stated that says if we can create enough chaos and protest on the streets, then we can leverage that to political power and lose the republic and replace it with a democracy. And they act blindly as if a disclaimer on their website will prevent there being any danger to anyone else. We've already seen federal properties destroyed. We've already seen federal agents harmed and endangered in this debate. They're walking right into it and gaslighting the whole thing. More. Disclaim violence, but well, you can't control all the options. They're not a part of us. So in one sense, you see the crazy difference.
I'm just looking at the website again, the nokings.org website. One of their taglines says, "No thrones, no crowns, no kings." This is something Sarah Jackson brought up in our staff meeting today, is that as Christians, we do have a king, and it's Christ. So it's not no thrones. There is a throne. It's not no crowns. Our king did wear a crown. He wore a crown of thorns. And he probably has a different crown now. And it's not no kings. We have a king.
King of Kings.
The King of Kings. And so it's not that kings are the problem. It's that earthly kings are evil and are a problem. But we have a heavenly king if we are Christians. So if you're a Christian attending these events, there should be a king that you are subject to.
Boy, that is a fascinating thought. And how does that king look at this process, which is one of the things we've been trying to ferret out, is what does the Bible teach? And we came to the idea that the Bible always teaches the same thing. We live in a fallen world. We have to be very careful. That's why Dr. Allen admonishes us to self-government and the responsibilities that are attending therein. We live in a fallen world. We have to be careful because there are bad actors who can take advantage of even well-intentioned people. So we've got to be aware of that. So there's a sense of personal responsibility and process because we live in a fallen world. In addition to that, if we call for perfect or nothing, we get nothing every time. No one likes everything about our form of government. No one likes everything about our history. We are a fallen people struggling to find a way to the light. That light is a light of liberty. But there is no document that exists that has ever created more liberty under law in the history of the human existence other than the Declaration and the Constitution. This platform has done more. These folks are saying, enough of that. We need the chaos to create the change to move to a democracy. Now, they claim they're saving a democracy that never existed. They're not saving anything. They want us to buy the lie on that and let them, they believe that if they can move the needle with 3.5%, then they can really pour the money on and watch how much more they can get out of the sentiment.
Well, and you hit on it before. This is just a wave they're trying to move towards the 2026 election and 2028 election. That's what they're moving towards.
So what can we do? We can always go to the scriptures and look hard and read. We find the principles in the Bible. Expose, resist, overcome. Those are words that are used specifically in the Bible in how we confront evil. We expose it. We don't hide it. We resist it. We resist it through prayer. We resist it through positive action. And sometimes you have to resist evil, even in a situation in war. Now, that's not what we're talking about here. But we can't say that resistance is always nonviolent because there was a thing called World War II. Had we not gone into violent war against the Axis powers, we wouldn't be here today. There is time when love of neighbor requires defending your neighbor from a greater evil. And humans get to that point. It is horrible. It is awful. It is terrible. And it should never be trifled with. So the words of battle are very dangerous because ultimately what we're called, expose, resist, we're called to overcome evil by doing good, to overwhelm evil by doing good. Here's a suggestion. We're dedicating the next 2 years, next year and a half, to the celebration of the Declaration of Independence as a document unto itself. Forget the politics, forget the protests, forget the elections, forget blah, 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 blah. Celebrate the Declaration for what it says and what it has accomplished. And we have lots of things that we're doing in this on the air, on screen, in live events, in publications. Please join us in this endeavor to celebrate the Declaration. To learn more, please get onto our mailing list because we'll send you a monthly update, tell you how we're doing and what we're doing. Please join in the process by circulating these programs to others. And please, if you feel that you want to do something positive, help us declare the truth of the Declaration because the truth will set us free.
The Public Square is a broadcast service of the American Policy Roundtable.